You submitted the paper, you waited, the rejection came. Most researchers read that email, feel it, and then either revise immediately, reactive, or put the paper in a folder and avoid it, also reactive. Neither is a debrief. This video gives you a structured process for reading a rejection accurately so you can make a real decision about your next step, not a defensive one. Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Deal, academic writing coach and published researcher. Today, I'm talking about how to read a journal rejection instead of just absorbing it. Specifically, why rejection is data, not a verdict, and what that actually means in practice. I'm going to talk about the 4 types of journal rejection and what each one tells you. For example, a desk rejection is not the same as a peer review rejection. We're going to talk about how to sort reviewer comments into actionable, vague, and potentially biased categories, and then talk about the difference between a research report and a journal paper, and how to tell which one you submitted. There are 3 diagnostic questions to check whether your core argument is clear, and finally 5 possible next steps after rejection and how to choose between them. Okay, so rejection isn't a verdict, it's data. That's something that I want to say upfront before we get into anything practical. When a rejection lands, whether it's a desk rejection after 2 days or a major revision request after 6 months that gets rejected, most of us do the same thing. We absorb it. We read it, we feel it, and then it becomes something we carry. It becomes evidence about whether we're good enough, whether the paper is good enough, whether we belong in this conversation. It's a completely understandable response to a system that gives you very little information and a lot of judgment. But it's not a useful one. Rejection is data. Not always clean data. Some of it is noise, some of it is bias, some of it is genuinely useful signal. It is all information, and it's your job after the initial sting to read it. That's what this video is about, how to actually debrief a rejection, not emotionally process it, not push through it, but how to read it, categorize it, and decide what to do next. Yeah, I want to tell you something a little embarrassing. I had been publishing for several years, not struggling, publishing. Then I wrote a paper I was genuinely excited about. Mixed methods research, years of fieldwork, findings I thought mattered. I submitted it, rejected. I revised the language, tightened the organization, submitted again, rejected. I did it again. 3rd time, rejected. This time the editor wrote back. The research was robust, he said, timely, but I needed to learn how to write a journal paper. He recommended a book for me to read. I stared at that email for a while. I had a PhD. I'd published papers. I'd reviewed manuscripts for dozens of journals at that point. And an editor had just handed me remedial homework. But here's the thing, he wasn't wrong. What I eventually figured out with the help of that book, by the way, it was Wendy Belcher's Writing Your Journal article in 12 Weeks. I recommend it. With the help of that book, I found out that I'd been writing reports, not papers. Well-organized, thorough, pointing at no one in particular. No core argument, just research. Properly arranged. Once I found the argument, I rewrote the paper. Not revised, rewrote. And it became 2 papers, 2 acceptances. That's what a rejection debrief can do when you know how to read it. Okay, so the first thing to do after rejection, before you revise a single sentence, before you start looking at other journals, is figure out what kind of rejection you actually received. Because they're not all the same, and they don't all mean the same thing. A desk rejection is relatively fast and relatively cheap. The editor looked at your paper and decided it wasn't right for that journal, often before it even went out to reviewers. That tells you almost nothing about your paper. It tells you about your journal selection. A rejection that comes after peer review with no invitation to revise and resubmit is more informative. It usually points to something structural, an argument that isn't clear or doesn't exist at all, a contribution that's vague, a positioning problem. That one's worth reading carefully. A revise and resubmit, or R&R, that gets rejected after revision is the most expensive kind. You spent a year on a paper that's now back at the beginning. That rejection tells you something about your revision strategy and how you responded to reviewer feedback. And major revisions that are ultimately accepted, that's not really rejection. But it is feedback that required a significant overhaul, and it tells you what the field needed from the paper to take it seriously. These are all different types, different information, different next steps. Start by categorizing before you do anything else. Once you know what kind of rejection you have, the next step is to read the reviewer comments carefully and with a sorting system. Here's the sorting system I use and that I've built into the Rejection Debrief workbook. Every comment goes into one of three buckets: actionable, vague, potentially biased. Actionable means it's specific enough that you can actually do something about it. The literature review doesn't address the gap between X and Y. That's actionable. Your sample size of 7 is insufficient for the statistical test you've used. That's actionable. Vague means you can understand the general direction of the critique, but there's not enough specificity to revise from it. A reviewer once told me, you should better justify your choices. What choices? And the introduction risks losing the reader. Where? At what point? These comments can be absorbed and can't be acted on directly. But then there's a third category, which I want to name plainly. Comments that focus on language rather than argument or evidence. If you write in English as an additional language, you may have encountered this. A reviewer who spends 3 paragraphs on sentence structure while saying almost nothing about the substance of your work. That is not rigorous peer review. It's a reviewer who cannot see past the syntax. You cannot revise your way out of feedback, and you should not try. This is the slide I wish I'd had 10 years ago. The single most common structural reason for repeated rejection, especially rejection that comes with feedback like, the argument isn't clear, or I'm not sure what the contribution is that your paper is written in the format of a report rather than a paper. A report is what you produce when you organize your research into background, methods, findings, discussion. It's thorough, it's accurate, and it's pointed at no one in particular, making no particular claim, joining no particular conversation. A journal paper is one idea, one singular contribution, large or small, that confirms, extends, or contradicts what we know, and is offered to a scholarly conversation that's already in progress. The question isn't what did you do and what did you find? It's what are you adding and to whom and why does it matter now? Those are 3 different questions that require 3 different answers. If you can answer all 3 in a single sentence each, clearly, specifically, without hedging, your core argument is probably there. If you find yourself writing a paragraph for each one, or if the answers feel vague, or if you're not sure which conversation you're joining, that's where the paper needs work, not the sentences, the architecture, the structure. The workbook attached to this video is a full diagnostic for this, with prompts to help you find the argument that's probably already implicit in your paper. You just haven't made it explicit yet. Once you've categorized the rejection, sorted the feedback, and checked your core argument, you have enough information to make a real decision, not a reactive one. Not one made in the first 48 hours after the email arrived, which, in my experience, is not the time to make decisions about your research. A real decision about your next step. There are 5 of them. Number 1, revise and resubmit to the same journal, because you were invited to, because the feedback is specific enough, the fit is strong enough that it's worth another round. As an aside, let me state this clearly, that if you get a revise and resubmit, do it. This is your shortest and clearest path to publication. Okay, next path is to revise for a new journal. This is a repositioning move. You're not just changing the submission output, you're thinking about who the new audience is, what the paper needs to say to them. Another path is to rewrite the argument. This is what I had to do in my case. Not revise the language, rewrite from the core argument outward. It's more work, but it produces a better paper. Another option is to split your paper into 2. Sometimes a rejection reveals that you had two distinct ideas in one container. Separating them is not admitting defeat, it's clarifying. And finally, the last path is sometimes just to step back. The scope might be too broad, the framing is wrong, or you need more data or time. That is a legitimate path, and it's worth naming it explicitly rather than sending the same paper out again and again, hoping the next journal won't notice the problems. This debrief doesn't make the decision for you, but it gives you the information you need to make it well. Okay, so here's the whole process in one slide. Pause and screenshot it if you think it's useful. There are 5 steps. Step 1, identify the type of rejection. Then sort the feedback. Then check the argument, choose the path, and set a timeline. That's it. But this last one does matter more than it sounds. The researchers I've watched publish consistently, not the ones who publish once or twice, but the ones who have real output over time, are the ones who keep the clock moving. Not frantically, but deliberately. And I'm not too humble to say I fall in this category. A rejection without an action and a timeline attached to it has a way of sitting in a folder for 6 months while you wait for ready. You don't have to feel ready, you just have to have a date. I want to close with something honest. The rejection cycle, what I call the rejection carousel, doesn't stop. I'm still on it. Everyone I know who publishes is still on it. The paper goes out, the wait begins, the feedback arrives, sometimes useful, sometimes vague, sometimes genuinely unfair. And then you make a decision and do it again. What changes over time is not the reaction that stops happening. What changes is that you stop treating it as a verdict and start treating it as information. The sting is still there. I'm not going to tell you it goes away, but it gets shorter, and you get faster at the move from, what does this say to me, to what does this tell me about my next step? That's the skill. That's what the debrief is for. Not to feel better about rejection, but rather to read it accurately and keep moving. If the topic of this video resonated with you, I'd love to hear what your most useful rejection taught you, and what kind of rejection it was. Head over to the Publish It Watering Hole, a free discussion board for academics, and share your experience with us. The link is in the description. I'll see you there. Finally, have you ever received a rejection that turned out to be genuinely useful? And if so, what made it useful? Tell me what type of rejection it was, what it actually told you in the comments below. This video complements Draft It, the essential 10-week workshop, a self-paced tutorial to draft your journal paper from abstract to conclusion. Draft It covers topics including how to structure your journal paper, articulating your core argument, writing and refining your introduction and literature review, basic contents and organization, concluding and finishing. It includes but goes beyond the standard IMRAD content. Remember, IMRAD is the acronym for the standard journal selections that include introduction, methods, results, and discussion. Draft It helps you tackle the 2 most fundamental, essential, critical elements of what elevator research report into a publishable journal paper: a clearly articulated core argument and the structure that supports your entire paper. So if you're ready to publish it, register for Draft It. Register for the self-paced course and you'll have unlimited access so you can start anytime, now, next month, or next year. Find the link in my bio. Thank you for watching this video. Check out my other videos on publishing your research in a peer-reviewed journal paper. Be sure to subscribe as I upload new content monthly.